In this lesson, we're talking about nonverbal communication. We'll talk about the role of nonverbal communication, and we'll compare verbal and nonverbal. We'll talk about the characteristics of nonverbal communication, types of nonverbal communication, functions of nonverbal communication, and how to improve your nonverbal communication. So there's an estimate that says somewhere between 70 and 93% of all communication is nonverbal. Now, first of all, that's a big jump, 70 to 93. So probably somewhere in there, somewhere in between there is accurate, but everything that your face does when you talk, any motion that you make with your body, whether you look interested or not interested when you're talking, those are all parts of nonverbal communication. So it really shouldn't surprise us that the number is large. There are even people who will say that 99% of all communication is nonverbal. So that's a big jump, especially with today, the way we communicate by texting and that sort of thing. So 70 to 93%, somewhere in there is the information that we will go with as accurate for this class. Nonverbal communication is information communicated without using words. It's that simple. It's nonverbal. Verbal means words, so nonverbal, no words. There are a couple of reasons that nonverbal communication is important. First of all, it helps us communicate effectively because we can use more than just words to express what we need to say. And in terms of strategic flexibility, it's also very important as part of communication management, because if we feel bad about something we've said, our face can show it. If we're happy about something that someone has told us, our face can show that too. So very important in terms of effective communication and strategic flexibility. Nonverbal communication basically can complement verbal communication. It could regulate communication. It could be a substitute for verbal communication, and it can accent communication. People who talk with their hands a lot usually use their hands as an accent for their communication. Now, if you've lost your voice, you can't talk, nonverbal communication is a great substitute. Now we have apps that we could actually type into, or we could text our message to someone. But, back before then, a simple nod of the head means yes, a shake of the head means no. So it's pretty easy to see how nonverbal communication can substitute for words as needed. Let's go back here for just a minute. Regulate. It can also regulate communication if you are ready for a conversation to stop. And if the conversation is still ongoing, maybe you cross your arms, maybe you give that eye, the eye of disapproval, and that helps stop the communication. Likewise, it can help start a communication. If you want someone to speak to you and maybe your eyes lock across a crowded room. No, just playing. But, kind of, sort of like that, where you let someone know that you're interested in talking to them by, making eye contact a little longer than normal. That would be starting a communication, and that's how you use that nonverbal communication to regulate it. Also, it can complement. So I mentioned shaking the head or nodding the head, and a lot of times we do that when we say the words, yes, absolutely, and you nod your head while you're saying it, or absolutely not, and you shake your head for effect to complement your verbal communication. So these are all the elements that affect communication, including your nonverbal communication. So you can see that we basically got it broken down here by culture, setting, the channel. Remember, the sender receiver sends a message through whatever channel. They get message and feedback, noise, and sender to the other sender receiver. So these are the elements that impact each one of those things. In terms of culture, our values, traditions, social relationships, politics, our worldview. The setting, we'll talk a little more about specifically, but the space, the space between you and the person you're talking to, the time difference between the two of you, if there is any, or the amount of time that you have in order to talk or communicate. Also, the place, what is the environment where you're talking? Is it loud? Is it hard to talk? Are you going to have to rely on nonverbal? What is that situation? And I'll let you guys look at this a little bit. We're going to talk about these things individually as we go on through this lesson. So a comparison. I promised you a comparison between verbal and nonverbal communication. Verbal communication is linear. It's, if you're having a one-on-one conversation, you say something, you expect a reply, and the conversation goes back and forth like that. In a classroom situation, the instructor speaks, you listen. If you have questions, you ask. It's very linear in that way. Nonverbal communication is holistic. It happens while the other person is talking. If we're in a classroom and I say something that I can see a look on your face that shows me you don't understand it, we are communicating at the same time at that point. One is verbal, one is nonverbal. Nonverbal is also very spontaneous, where in that specific example, you might not even realize that you're showing a look of confusion because it just happens so naturally. Verbal communication follows specific rules, specifically grammar. Now, we don't always speak with the correct grammar, but we do always speak in a structure that other people can understand. So we tailor our speech to the people we know that we're communicating with. For instance, if I'm talking to you, I'm going to try to use correct grammar because it's in a professional situation, and I would try to use best grammar, best tone of voice, and put forth a professional presentation. But if I'm talking with my best friend, I may say, girl, you just don't even know, which is, just kind of the way that the community we grew up in talked. So if I were talking to my grandmother, who talks with a very high pitch, or did when she was with us still, but I might say, ooh, grandma, because that's the way she talked. And it's just kind of the way we communicated. So while you do follow specific structure and grammar rules, you also tailor it, whether you realize it or not, to the person that you're talking to. And if you're not doing that in your classes, you should start focusing on a more professional communication in class. I know it's really nice when you're in a classroom with people that and you all get comfortable and you can have great dialogue and wonderful discussions in class. But this is a sophomore level class, so you should kind of be starting to prepare for more discussions that are professional in nature. Also, verbal communication is culture and context bound. We'll talk specifically about that when we talk about verbal communication. But just as an example, there's an age difference between us. And so if I say something is hot, there are a couple of things I mean, maybe three things. I might mean it's hot as in it's a big ticket item, it's a hot sell item, something like that. It might mean that it's good because it's hot. It might also mean, if we're talking about legal things, if something's hot, I might mean it's stolen if I'm talking about it. Someone mentioned in class recently that hot could mean bad. Like, oh, okay, well, I can see that too, especially with the legal aspect. If I say something is hot, you guys might say fire for that word now. So if I'd never heard it, then that would take me off guard, because our culture is different just age-wise. But as soon as I hear it, and as soon as I start to use it, it's no longer cool anymore, and young people will stop saying it, which is kind of how it works, and it seems like. But culture and context can also differ in terms of, dealing with people of different ethnicities, different religious backgrounds, different political backgrounds, and that's a big thing today too, it seems like, because we are talking more about politics. When I was growing up, was taught not to talk about two things, politics and religion, around people that I didn't know. And now it seems like that's what we talk about with people that we don't know. So I included a video for you guys to watch. Please do watch that. It's the one with friends, with Joey practicing his loser speech. And I want you to think about, as you watch that, is nonverbal communication always spontaneous? Because Joey is practicing his. So just to let you know, the answer to that is it's not always spontaneous, because you can practice it. Now, he didn't practice enough, obviously, as you'll see in the clip, but you can practice your reactions, which also helps you become more professional in your presentations. So let's talk about the characteristics of nonverbal communication. They are culturally determined, which is what we just really talked about. So I won't review that again. They may conflict with verbal messages. My favorite thing is when someone says no, but they shake their, or they nod their head yes. You know, that's a very definite conflict. You know, it's like they're nodding that they understand what I'm saying, but they're telling me no, or vice versa, which is really just kind of an odd situation. I always stop people and say, what do you mean by that? I mean, you're saying one thing and your head's saying the other. So what are you trying to say? But so nonverbal communication can conflict with verbal communication. Largely it's unconscious, but as the video with Joey shows, you can practice it and you can plan it. One of the things that my friends and I learned in college was what we liked to call the sorority smile. And you know, that's not meant to be offensive to sororities or anything at all, but it's what we learned to do in our sorority. You know, if you were with a group of people and you wanted to put your best presentation forward, you just opened that wide smile. And it sometimes would hide the fact that we were bored out of our minds and just wanted to go study or wanted to go somewhere else or whatever. So, but largely, nonverbal communication is unconscious. It shows your feelings, it shows your attitudes, and it can vary by gender. So every time I say by gender, I always stop and think about that. I really think that that's going to change as we continue dropping gender roles more and more. As we continue that, I think that we will see that nonverbal communication may not vary as much by gender anymore. Nonverbal communication can also display power. And I'm thinking back to the eye, the look that you as a parent can give your kid, or you as a kid got from your parent, just that look that displays power, that don't test me look, or I meant what I said, or, you know, whatever that look is, you know what that look is. Teachers do it. I hate to have to do it. You know, I haven't done that with my kid since she was very, very young. So I hate to have to do that in the classroom, but sometimes I do. So there are different types of nonverbal communication, and one is paralanguage. Paralanguage includes a lot of different aspects, like the rate at which we speak. I'm actually talking a little faster here as we go through these notes because I tend to talk very slowly in class because I think about every word that comes out. I want it to be right. But I also found out that you can speed me up. So I'm trying to speed myself up so you don't have to. So rate, you can speak quickly, you can speak slowly. So if you were in a classroom and you notice that I'm speaking slower, it's literally because I'm thinking of everything that I'm about to say. Pitch is something else. I mentioned when I talked to my grandmother, I kind of did a little higher voice. Well, that's because grandma talked in a high-pitched voice. She tended to communicate with that pitch difference. So we communicated in that pitch difference because it was part of her culture. But pitch can mean something a little different too. Like if I'm angry, I'll lower my pitch, lower it to let somebody know I mean business. If I'm excited, I may raise that pitch and go, yay, that sort of thing. So pitch makes a difference too as part of paralanguage. Volume is also part of paralanguage. So if you're whispering, then you're letting someone know, even though you didn't say, come, let me tell you a secret. If you're whispering, you're letting them know non-verbally, just the fact that you are doing this kind of lower kind of utterance, that this is something that you don't want to share with just everyone. So in that way, even though it's making a sound, it's still nonverbal because it's the choice that you use to share the information in the whisper. Also quality. Paralanguage, the quality of the words that you choose can make a difference. And that can differ by culture too. So I know a student who transcribes all of her notes that she gets in my history classes, and she puts them in her Gen Z talk, which is awesome. And she read them to me one day after class, and I didn't understand anything that she said, although, you know, I just given the lecture. She just put it in a different kind of language. So, but that was the quality that she understood. Vocal fillers are also part of nonverbal communication. And a vocal filler is something like or My daughter had a class, an online class, that she just couldn't seem to focus on. So it helped her to focus on the instructor's online fillers. And she said, you know, why did they say and so much? And honestly, it's because they're thinking ahead. It's part of that thinking ahead aspect where it's sometimes it comes across as, does this person know what they're talking about? Yeah, chances are they really do know what they're talking about, but they're jumping so far ahead in their mind to think, are they going to understand it if I say it this way? Will they understand it better if I use this word or that word? So kind of all of that jumping ahead that you may do in a conversation might leave you with an or an Body movement is also a type of nonverbal communication, and there are several aspects of that too, like emblems. Emblems might mean you're giving a thumbs up to someone, or you're making the okay with your fingers, you know, your thumb and your forefinger with the little three fingers up, okay. Just word to the wise, emblems mean different things in different cultures. If you did a thumbs up or the okay in a culture other than the United States, you might be telling someone something really offensive by doing that. So always know who you're communicating with. Body movement, illustrators is like when you're talking with your hands. You're using your hands to say it was this big or it was this small, or the fish that got away was like this size or whatever. So you're actually using your hands to illustrate something that you're saying. You're also able to use your body as a regulator to determine who's going to speak next. And that would be, maybe you're in a group of people and you're talking and you look to someone and that look is their cue to go next. Or maybe you point to someone. You don't even have to ask them what they think. You just point to them and they tell you what they think. So body movement can also be a regulator. Body movement can also display feelings, obviously. If you have your head tucked down and you have tears running down your face, we know you're sad. If you're smiling ear to ear, we know that something great has happened. Or if you're like me, you're trying really hard not to laugh at an inappropriate time. So there are lots of ways that you can display your feelings, and you guys know those. Be sure to look at the notes that I included of the emojis through Lucy, or however I phrased that in your notes, but it's kind of interesting to see just how much expression she could show in her face as a comedy actor. Adapters too are part of body movement. These are things like fidgeting, things that help you kind of adapt to your environment. If you've ever given a speech in front of your class before, or if you've ever seen someone else give a presentation in your class before, you may have noticed them like kind of rock back and forth. Maybe they spread their feet apart just a little bit and they rock back and forth. That's something that calms people down sometimes, and they do it kind of intuitively. Also, if you've got a podium in front of you maybe leaning on the podium is something that you could do to adapt to your environment if you have a tendency to move around too much when you're talking. So that's just an example of an adapter as far as a body movement. Facial expressions are another type of nonverbal communication. Eye messages, we've already talked about. We'll come back to attractiveness in a minute and clothing together. Smell. Oh my goodness. Smell is a nonverbal communication type. So remember that, if you're going to a job interview, you don't want to wear too much perfume or cologne because that could be overwhelming. At the same time, you don't want to go in after running a 5K and not taking a moment to shower, which could be ooky at best. Touch can also be a type of nonverbal communication. If you see someone who's sad and you just reach over and put your hand on their shoulder, you're saying, I care, but you're not actually saying any words. Also, your manners, the manners that you show are a type of nonverbal communication. Silence, also a type of nonverbal communication. If you have ever received a silent treatment from someone, you get that message, you know what they're telling you. So I want to go back to attractiveness now. Attractiveness as a type of nonverbal communication. I'm not talking about the attractiveness in the way that you have to be the prettiest or the most handsome or the awesomest person in the world as far as your hair goes, like always a good hair day or anything like that. I'm talking about being presentable, not necessarily gauging completely on looks, but gauging on cleanliness, all of these other things like smell, that sort of thing that make people want to talk to you. So in that way, attractiveness on its own is a type of nonverbal communication. Clothing is also a type of nonverbal communication. I love the meme that says, I was told to dress for the job I want, and now I'm sitting in HR dressed like Wonder Woman. I love that meme because it always reminds me of this. So clothing can have an impact in terms of the way you wear your clothing. Again, it doesn't mean you have to have the best. You don't have to go by brand name or anything like that, but are you dressing appropriately for the particular situation? Like we wear things to class. If I were a student, I honestly straight up would come to class in sweatpants every day that I could possibly do it until I had to wash all my sweatpants. It doesn't matter as much as a student as it would for an instructor. If I came to class wearing sweatpants as an instructor, I would be the one in HR getting the message that says, what are you thinking? So anyway, that's a way that clothing can be part of your nonverbal communication types too. Body adornment, and we see more of this too. I'm fascinated by these ear gauges and stuff. I think they're really cool. I can't get one because my ears aren't pierced because I'm chicken, but that kind of stuff and piercings like face piercings and stuff fascinate me. But they're also a type of nonverbal communication. I know that in one particular job I had, we were looking to hire a graphic designer. A young man came in to interview for the job who wore a suit, and he had a portfolio with him, but he hadn't done much work, and he didn't really seem to have much interest in art. He was really kind of just looking for a job, and I'm sure he was a great guy. But another guy came in and he had an earring. Oh, the scandal of it. I mean, this was like 20 years ago, but so he had an earring, and my boss said, I just don't believe I can hire him because he's got an earring. And I pointed out to him, look at the portfolio that he brought in. He's clearly interested in art. He also wants a job, needs a job. I mean, there's no shame in needing a job, but this man is clearly interested in art. And I would argue that earring is kind of artsy and very appropriate for his line of work. And he got the job and he was great. He was absolutely great. I was really glad that we hired him. But body adornment can be a type of nonverbal communication. And you got to remember too, in terms of cultural communication, people will read it differently. So anyway, I think that changes over time too, and people become more and more accepting. So space and distance. Now, Penny actually helped Sheldon with this example in the video I provided you in this unit from Big Bang Theory, where Penny is helping him understand how to welcome people into his world. So that's one way that you can create an open territory through body language. And I want to talk to you specifically about these different distances here. So here are the distance zones. Self is in the middle. Intimate is 0 to 1.5 feet. Personal is 1.5 to 4 feet. Social is 4 to 12 feet. And then public is 12 to 25 feet. So now COVID has changed this a little bit. We're all kind of accustomed to staying 6 feet away now. And I noticed that in general, we're all talking louder because of it, which is fine. I mean, there's nothing wrong with talking loud and staying 6 feet apart. I'm totally cool with that myself. But in terms of personal space, if you've ever heard that, get out of my personal space, we're talking about a space that's 1.5 to 4 feet. So generally speaking, that's a comfort space that we have with people. Now, some people don't understand this concept of personal space, and it's okay to kindly tell people. I've had to do it myself. It's awkward at first. A couple of times it wasn't so friendly, but I didn't mean for it to be friendly because I was agitated. But it's okay to tell people that. You can say, would you mind backing up a little bit? Just stay about as far away as my hand is. So fun fact, if you stand and you stretch your arm straight out from pretty much the tip of your nose to the tip of your fingertips is going to be about 3 feet. So if you can keep someone about 3 feet away, you're in that ideal personal space zone. I know in teaching, sometimes I have students who don't understand personal space, and they're just, right up by me, and I have to ask them to step back. It just, for me, it's unnerving. Some people don't mind. I mean, sometimes they're in my intimate space. I'm like, you need to get way back, but it's okay to kindly tell someone to move back. I've had to do that in line at the grocery store before, and that was the one that was probably the most uncomfortable because I'm dealing with a stranger, and I just ask, would you mind moving back, please? I'm still checking out here. And, actually what I said was, your arm just touched my arm. And the last man who touched my arm bought my groceries. So could you step back a little bit? He laughed and it was all good. And he moved back some because he realized, it was a difficult conversation to start, but totally acceptable to do it. You can control your nonverbal communication through self-awareness and through controlling your emotions. Sometimes it's hard. Sometimes it's hard to control your emotions, especially if you get angry quickly, or if you hear something, if you get bad news right away that makes you horribly sad, but you need to take a minute to get somewhere safe before you can actually process and react. So in that way, you can control your emotions. Self-awareness too, like this whole video that I shared with you with Joey practicing his loser reaction. Until Rachel mentioned it, he had no idea that he might lose. He was too focused on winning, which is great. That's a positive mindset. But being self-aware, if you could win, you could also lose. That self-awareness kind of opens up an opportunity to share a better reaction publicly. Okay, those are our notes here. Please watch all the videos I included for you in this unit as well. And let me know, as always, if you have any questions.